G'day guys, Mackie with the Outer Circle, and today we're going to tackle the Australian pricing structure for Games Workshop. This structure doesn't just apply in Australia, it also applies in a lot of other countries, basically everyone outside of Europe and North America. But because I'm Australian, I've mostly just sourced the data that concerns Australia as I live here, and it's really easy for me to do. So, first of all, this is not definitive. I can only delve so far into the economics before it becomes a snorefest. Also, I can only guess at some of the motivations for Games Workshop's pricing, but very much these are most likely outcomes based on all my years in the field. This isn't just crazy pricing structures I've pulled out of my ass, this is the way that businesses work. Thirdly, I've had to use a lot of charts and calculators and other resources in order to get this information and get it across to you, the audience. Lastly, don't take this as a critique of Games Workshop. Even if it comes off that way, just try listening to the information and absorb it and try and understand it. It may interest you, it may not. So, now we've gotten through that, let's talk about Big Macs. Yeah, the McDonald's burger. Let's also talk about Purchasing Power Parity, or PPP. What's the idea here? Well, you see, a Big Mac, they're pretty much sold in every country. Everywhere has a McDonald's. And a Big Mac costs just about the same in every country in the world. It costs a certain amount based on what you can afford in said country. This price is set by McDonald's, just like Games Workshop sells their products in a lot of countries and sets their price. Now, the interesting thing is, they sell based on the purchasing power parity of each nation. Australia and Canada have pretty much identical purchasing power parity. We make basically a one-to-one conversion of our dollars and things like that. Wages are pretty similar, living conditions are similar, that kind of thing, even though we're in totally different parts of the world, Canada being in North America and Australia being in the South Pacific. So, interesting thing is, you'd think the same thing applies with Games Workshop. It does not. It's interesting because the purchasing power parity allows you to predict a currency's worth moving forward. You can see what their averages are in the past, and you can roughly tell what they're going to be over the time. Therefore, McDonald's sets their prices based on this. They go, okay, we'll set a Big Mac at, $4.50 or whatever, because we know that this country's dollar is not likely to shift much higher or lower over time. Now, don't get me wrong, this is not a perfect system. It has limitations, such as different wages, production costs, shipping costs, taxes that apply to different countries. That's something we'll cover off on later. But it's an interesting thing to know the index and how McDonald's does it compared to how Games Workshop does it. Now, obviously I'm grossly oversimplifying the index and how it works, but I have included a link to the fully interactive chart just for your benefit as the audience, so you can go and check it out for yourselves and how it actually works. Now, let's talk about costing the product. When you own or run a business like I do, you have to appropriately cost your products. I've been working in plastic and steel industries for 16 years, including working laser cutting, plastic injection molding, and metal casting. Now, how do you try and cost products? There are several factors to take into account, so we need to start at the beginning. Research, design, and development. This is cost that you will suffer no matter who you are. Every company will suffer from this. Thankfully, it's pretty easy to figure out. You mostly just have to take the employee's wage and spread it out in tiny increments over your whole year. This fee doesn't come into play for individual stores for reasons we'll cover later. This fee is instead eaten up at head office. Next, you have the physical cost of the items. A mold for something like, say, a Land Raider is going to set you back about $10,000. On top of that, the molding machine will be a lot of money, like $100,000. However, it's a long-term investment, and you will spread that cost out over all the kits that machine produces over at least a decade of work. So, let's go down to the smallest level here. One model kit, perhaps a Space Marine Tactical Squad. The cost of production will be in the literal cents. 3 to 7 cents of material. Let's just go up higher. Let's go higher than that. just to be safe, and we'll say it's 10 cents. That's the cost of the plastic to make it, and the energy consumed by the machine doing so. Because remember, this is a very quick process, plastic injection molding, which is why it's used. It's quick and efficient. So the $10,000 mold, may as well spread that out over a number of kits, right? You don't want to try and make back the $10,000 cost on the first kit you sell, do you? So what we do is we aim to spread it out over maybe 10,000 kits. It's not really that much when you consider just how many tactical squads are out there. As an example, over 800 Betrayal Cal sets are known to be sold in Australia and New Zealand, thanks to polling that was done by myself and the Eye of Horus podcast, among others. Many people buying 2 to 3 sets of the game. So that 800 known Betrayal Cal sets is actually higher. It's like 837 or something, but that alone is 2,400 tactical squads. And that's one country. And we're a 10th of the population of the United States of America. So, you know, work that out. So you can set the payoff for your 10,000 molds at just $1 per production. So that when you've sold your initial batch of 10,000 units, you've now paid off the mold. Hell, you might as well throw an additional $1 on there for the cost of the injection molding machine itself. So far you've spent $2.10 and you've met your production costs for the mold, the molding machine, the material, and the cost of the machine to run. Now, as a note right here, something like a character, like a captain or special character, is unlikely to sell anywhere near as many as what a tactical squad will. Therefore, the mold payoff cost would be higher. The mold, however, will also be smaller and most likely cheaper. But, you know, you could be looking at $3, $5, even $7 per character just to soak up the cost of the mold. But, say, something like, I don't know, a Space Marine captain, that mold's probably only going to be about $2,500 mold. It's just got nowhere near the number of sprues. Anyway, let's move on. Shipping and distribution. Shipping is cheap, far, far cheaper than people would expect. You can import a 36-foot shipping container for $3,000. You can fill it by volume, and if you pack it to the brim with just tactical squads, it's around 20,000 boxes. And that's with a floor covered in pallets so you can get them in and out, according to the dimensions supplied on a shipping container calculator. So that means shipping from country to country is only going to cost you about 15 cents per box. On top of this, the cost of freight to and from the dock will be around $65 per hour. Now, not many places are further than 2 hours from a port anywhere in the world, minus people buying Warhammer in the middle of, say, the Sahara Desert. You're really only looking at maybe an additional 1 to 2 cents per box to cover your road freight costs. Even if your truck costs you $130 per hour, that's 2 cents per box. That's 2 hours driving to the dock, and then 2 hours driving from the dock and distributing it to your store. That's pretty good. So now, with our cost of production, cost of molds, cost of all of that shipping combined, we've now spent $2.27 Australian on our product. It's not really that much, is it? Let's talk about margin, gross profit, and making money. So, you know what your miniature costs, but you need to figure out your wages and add that to your costs. Now, the way most companies sort of work out how much they've got to sell to make money, well, a lot of distributors like to do this by making a mandated number of sales. Usually this will be split into different categories. You might include things like, say, miniature lines. So, for example, all of the miniatures Games Workshop produces might be considered one type of category. Another might be paints, paints, hobby supplies. Another one might be like novels, codexes, rulebooks. And they'll say, you know, we want to sell X amount of novels Y amount of paints and Z amount of miniatures per month to make the quota. This quota is generally pretty achievable, and it's the minimum that you have to achieve in order to be turning a profit. If you just barely achieve that, you're basically just running even. You're not making any money. But once you pass it, you're just making money hand over fist. That's the interesting thing about sales quotas. Now, most companies have an option. Do they set a high margin, which means they need a low turnover, but you cover your costs with a lot less sales? Or do you go for a low margin, but you have to ship a lot more units? Games Workshop, by all accounts, chooses the former. They try and sell as few kits as possible for the greatest profit available. This is the opposite of a company like McDonald's, who instead opts to sell as many things as they can and just accepts that, yeah, they're not going to make much money on them, but they're going to sell so much of it, it's going to work out in the long run. Now, a couple of little points to quickly note. We chose to spread out the costs over 10,000 kits. Games Workshop might not. They might try and spread it out over just 500 kits. I simply don't know. But at the volumes they ship in, I'd be working off something like 10,000, having dealt with plastic molding before. Not models, by the way, industrial parts. Anyway. Another thing to point out is Games Workshop sells a variety of kits each month. One customer might buy a single figurine, another might buy a starter set. The example of a tactical squad is used for an ideal world, which of course we don't live in. The shipping container and the cost of shipping and 15 cents per box, that's all good and well if the shipping container is all tactical squads. You start filling it up with boxes of Betrayal at Kel, well, you're going to fit far less of them in there, so therefore the shipping per box is going to be higher. That said, there's so many kits inside the box, it'll probably work out for you in the end anyway. So let's go into the specific part that concerns us now, the cost of tactical squads in Australia. Again, tactical squads are being chosen because of an ideal world that we live in, blah 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 blah. Let's do some maths. We know that tactical squad in Australia is 65 Australian dollars. We know that the same kit in the UK is £25, which converts to 45 Australian dollars at the current exchange rate. That's a difference of $20 or a 75% markup. Now, this is quite falsely attributed to import tax and tariffs. Do you know why I know this is false? Because I have the maths to prove it. You see, that $45 kit was subject to a 20% VAT, which is only applied to the UK and EU sales. Therefore, you must take that 20% off the $45 straight away. This actually takes down the cost of the item, including Games Workshop still making their profit. Remember, this is just the tax you're removing. It doesn't change what Games Workshop makes out of it. It drops the price of the kit from $45 down to 36 Australian dollars. Now is the point where you send the kit to Australia. Now, using our trusty tariff and GST calculator, we plug the $36 in, and we pull out an import tax of just $1.80, and on top of that a GST, or goods and services tax, is applied of 10%, and in this instance the goods and services and the import tariff combined, well, you add another $3.78 for the GST. Adding these to the $36 kit, you end up with a total cost of $41.58. Yes, you're reading that correctly. Games Workshop kits are actually cheaper to sell in Australia than the UK, because the UK's taxes are so high on Games Workshop products. Mind blown, right? And I can hear people saying right now, Macca, they're making an extra $23 roughly off each kit. The greedy bastards. Well, yeah, technically they are. But I need to point out two very important things. First, our wages are higher. Slightly. The big thing with the Australia versus UK average wage is we've got more millionaires per capita. And the top end really skews the data because it brings everyone else's average wage up. Once you get rid of the top end of both countries, our wages probably about 6 to 8% per annum difference. Therefore, I think it's only fair that Games Workshop charges Australia 8 to 10% more for every kit they sell here. So realistically, if they sold a tactical squad in Australia for $50, I would feel incredibly confident saying they are making a lot of money off that kit still. However, they don't sell them at $50, they sell them at $65. Why is this? Well, this is where the second and most important note of all in this entire video is. Games Workshop does not work off the current exchange rate. They aren't looking at the Big Mac index. They went through the last 10 years and looked at the time our dollar was at its lowest, when they compared it to the pound, and then that's where they set the price. That's the exchange rate they chose. Why did they do this, one might ask? It's simple. It's a fixed price. If our dollar drops, suddenly we're paying less to get the same fixed price product. Because when you convert that $45 kit, when you pay $45 and it converts back into pounds, it's not worth anywhere near as many pounds as it would be normally. Games Workshop would lose money. Thing is, however, for the other 99% of the time when our economy operates as normal, or even when it's strong against the pound, they just make insane money hand over fist. We are essentially a cash cow in Australia. Unless, it's important to note, unless there's an economic crisis, in which case we drop to the pathetic state of merely covering their costs and a meagre profit on the side. There's all the maths, guys. That's why you pay so much for Games Workshop in Australia. You pay 60% or more for the exact same miniatures because one day the economy may possibly, maybe do bad. The reason I covered the costs of taxes, shipping, production is because they're the arguments people love to point out, the ones they love to go to every time you talk about costs in Australia. They like to say, oh, Australia pays 60% more because your taxes are higher. No, they're not, they're lower. Oh yeah, well, your shipping is high. Well, yeah, it is, but spread over the boxes, it's 5-10 cents here and there. That doesn't add up to a 60% markup. Oh yeah, well, you know, a higher cost of living. Well, yeah, I guess there is a higher cost of living. You got us there, but again, it's not 70% higher, it's like 8% higher. This is the whole point. The video is not about Games Workshop being wrong, it's just about why they set the prices the way they do. The entire problem is rooted in a company who is so afraid of external economies crashing and so afraid of variable pricing that rather than go to all the effort of setting all the prices each month varying, they just set their prices higher as a just-in-case measure and just happen to rake in all the money in the world the rest of the time. Rather unsatisfying ending right there. Thank you all for watching, comment below, and I'll see you all next time.